The alarm on my suit was screaming before I even understood what I was looking at. I was hanging in open space, tethered to a mining line, 300 meters from my ship, when the rock in front of me split open like an eggshell, and something metal looked back at me. Not a machine. Not exactly. Something that felt like it was looking at me on purpose. My name is Daniel Cole, and up until that moment, the most exciting thing that had ever happened to me in 11 years of salvage work was finding a crate of unopened ration bars in a dead freighter. I was not a hero. I was not chosen for anything. I was a guy with a mortgage on a bunk-sized apartment back on Kessa Station, doing dangerous work in the middle of nowhere because it paid better than anything else I was qualified for. The company called this place the Hollow Belt. Nobody wanted it. It was full of wrecks nobody could identify, drifting in a slow graveyard, orbit around a dead star that didn't even have a real name, just a catalog number. My job was simple: find debris with resale value, strip it, tag it, get paid. Don't ask questions about the things that didn't add up, because in this line of work, a lot of things never add up, and asking questions just slows down the paycheck. So when my scanner picked up a hard metal signature buried inside an asteroid that should have been solid rock all the way through, I did what I always did. I went to look. I did not expect the rock to open on its own. I did not expect the metal underneath to be smooth, seamless, and warm, even though it had clearly been sitting in the freezing dark for longer than any surface should survive. And I definitely did not expect the light. It started at the edges of the opening, a thin gold line, like a seam of fire had been drawn along the metal. Then it spread, faster than anything mechanical should move, racing across a surface easily the size of 3 cargo ships put together. The rock crumbled away in pieces, falling silently in every direction, and underneath it, I saw a hull unlike anything in any catalog I had ever studied in 11 years of doing this job. It didn't look built. It looked grown. Curved lines that seemed to flow into each other, with no rivets, no plating seams, no maintenance hatches. And carved across the surface, in patterns that caught the gold light and threw it back at me, was writing. Not painted, not printed, cut directly into the metal, deep and deliberate, like it had been done by hand a very long time ago. My suit's radiation counter jumped so hard I thought it had broken. Then I realized it hadn't broken. It was reading correctly. Whatever this thing was, it was old. Old enough that the numbers on my display didn't make sense next to a hull that looked freshly polished. "Base, this is Cole," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've got something out here. It's not on any chart. Repeat, this object is not on any chart." Silence for 3 seconds, then my supervisor's voice, flat and unimpressed, the way it always was. "Cole, if it's not on the chart, tag it, and move to the next quadrant. We are behind schedule." "You don't understand," I said. "This thing just opened itself. It's not debris. It's a full ship, and it's still—" The line cut out. Not from a signal problem. My comm display just went dark, like something had reached over and switched it off. And in the sudden silence, I heard something else. A voice. Not through my speakers, not through any device I owned. It came from inside my own head, calm and clear, speaking a language I had never heard in my life. And somehow, impossibly, I understood every single word. "Welcome home," it said. "We have been waiting for you. I want to be honest about what I did next, because it's not the brave thing you'd expect from a story like this." I panicked. I kicked away from the hull so hard my tether snapped taut, and yanked me back like a fish on a line. My heart was slamming against my ribs, my breath was fogging up my visor, and every instinct in my body was screaming at me to get back to my ship and burn hard in the opposite direction. But the ship didn't chase me. It didn't move at all. The golden light along its seams just pulsed once, slow and patient, the way a candle flickers when a door opens somewhere in a house. I hung there in space for almost a full minute, breathing hard, waiting for something terrible to happen. Nothing did. Eventually, my curiosity did what it always does. It beat my fear. I pulled myself back toward the hull, hand over hand along the tether, until I was close enough to touch the surface again. This time, when my glove made contact, a section of the hull simply folded inward, smooth and silent, revealing a corridor bathed in soft light, the color of morning sun. There was no vacuum rushing out, no decompression, no warning klaxons, just an open door, waiting. I should have turned around right there. Any sane person would have turned around right there. But something about the voice in my head, about the way it had said home, like it meant something specific to me, and not just anyone who happened to float by, made my legs move forward instead of back. I stepped inside, and the door closed behind me without a sound. The corridor was warm, actually warm, the kind of warm you feel on your skin, not just a number on a suit display. My display told me the atmosphere outside my suit was breathable, chemically close enough to what I grew up with that my body wouldn't know the difference. I didn't trust it. Not yet. I kept my helmet sealed and walked forward slowly, boots echoing on a floor that looked like polished stone but felt, under the press of my weight, almost alive. The walls were covered in the same carved writing I had seen outside, except in here. Some of the symbols glowed faintly, shifting in brightness as I passed, like the ship was reading me the way I might read a book. At the end of the corridor, the space opened into a wide chamber, circular, with a high ceiling that curved up into darkness. In the center stood a pillar of light, thin and vertical, humming with a low tone that I felt more than heard. The voice returned, softer this time, almost gentle. "You carry the mark of the old line," it said. "I have searched a very long time for someone who carries it. I did not expect to find you here, in a place this small, this forgotten. But blood remembers, even when minds forget." "I don't know what you're talking about," I said out loud, my own voice sounding strange and small inside my helmet. "I'm not anyone important. I'm a salvage worker. I strip old wrecks for parts. That's it. That's my whole life." The light in the pillar brightened, just slightly, like the ship was studying me even more closely. "Then it will surprise you to learn who you are," it said. "Give me your hand, steward. I mean you no harm. I have waited too long to risk losing you now." I stood there for a long moment, staring at that column of light, my mind racing through every possible explanation. A malfunction, a trap, a hallucination brought on by too many hours in a suit and not enough sleep. But none of those explanations felt true, and somewhere underneath the fear, a small, stubborn part of me wanted to know what came next. I reached out with my gloved hand. The moment my fingers touched the light, it didn't burn. It didn't hurt at all. Instead, it felt like something settling into place, like a key finally turning in a lock that had been stuck for a very long time. Warmth spread up my arm, through my chest, and for one strange second, I saw flashes of things I had never seen before. Stars I didn't recognize. A city built from light and stone that didn't exist anywhere in human history. A woman's face, calm and proud, looking directly at me across a distance I couldn't measure, in a time I couldn't place. Then it was gone, and I was just standing in a quiet chamber again, my hand resting against a pillar of golden light that had gone soft and steady, like it was breathing. "You are the one," the voice said, quieter now, almost reverent. "After all this time, after everyone gave up, you came back." "I didn't come back," I said, my voice shaking. "I don't even know what I just walked into." "You will," the ship answered. "And when the others learn what has woken here, they will come for you too, some to help, some to silence you before the truth spreads. You should decide, quickly, what kind of person you intend to be when that happens." I didn't have an answer for that, not yet. All I knew, standing alone in that glowing chamber, farther from home than I had ever been, was that my ordinary life had just ended, and whatever came next was not going to be simple, and it was not going to be safe. I turned to look back down the corridor, toward the door that had let me in, half expecting it to be sealed shut, trapping me inside for good. It was still open, waiting, giving me the choice to leave. I didn't take it. Instead, I asked the only question that felt like it mattered. Who am I supposed to be? The light pulsed once, warm and deep, like an old and patient heart finally beating again after a very long sleep. "That," it said, "is a story that will take longer than a moment to tell. But I promise you, Daniel Cole, by the time it is finished, the whole galaxy will know your name." I stood there in the silence that followed, staring at a light that had just called me by my full name, a name I never gave it, and I understood, with a cold and certain feeling in my chest, that there was no going back to the life I had before. Whatever this ship was, whatever it thought I was, my simple, quiet, unimportant existence was already gone. And somewhere out past the edge of that dead system, something enormous had already begun to notice that it was gone too. The company found out about the ship 6 hours after I did, and by then, it was already too late to stop what had started. I had made it back to my own ship, a battered little hauler I called the Marion, and I sat in the pilot's chair for a long time without touching the controls, just staring out at the massive hull floating beside me, glowing faintly gold against the black. My hands would not stop shaking. Every few minutes, I checked my suit readings again, half convinced I had imagined the whole thing, half afraid that I hadn't. Then my comm crackled back to life on its own, and my supervisor's voice came through, tight and sharp in a way I had never heard from him before. Cole, report your position immediately. We are seeing readings out there that do not make sense, and command wants eyes on that object right now. I told him what happened. All of it. The rock opening, the hull, the voice in my head, the chamber with the pillar of light. I expected him to laugh, or to accuse me of breathing bad air. Instead, there was a long pause, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed completely. "Do not go near it again," he said. "Do not touch it. Do not speak to it. We have people coming out to secure the site, and until they arrive, you stay exactly where you are." "Who's coming out?" I asked. "This is a scrap contract. We don't have security teams for scrap contracts." He didn't answer that question. He just repeated the order and cut the line. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt something cold settle into my stomach, because in 11 years of working for that company, I had never once heard my supervisor sound afraid. The ship spoke to me again that night, while I sat alone in the dark of my cabin, unable to sleep. "They will try to take you somewhere else," it said, the same calm voice sliding into my thoughts like it had never left. "Somewhere they can study you without me watching. I would prefer that you did not go." "I don't exactly have a lot of choices here," I said out loud, feeling foolish for talking to an empty room, but talking anyway. "This is my job. These are the people who pay me." "Then let me make you an offer instead," the voice said. "Stay close to me, and I will keep you safer than any station in this system. I have already begun repairing what time and cold have damaged in me. Soon I will be strong again, stronger than anything your people currently understand, and I do not intend to let harm come to the one thing I have been waiting so long to find." I laughed, a short, nervous sound. "You don't even know me. I could be a terrible person for all you know." "I know your blood," it answered. "I know the line you carry, going back further than your written history. That is enough for now. The rest, I am eager to learn." I didn't have an answer for that either, so I just sat there, watching the golden light of that ancient hull, glowing steady and patient outside my window, until exhaustion finally pulled me under. The company ship arrived 2 days later, sleek and unmarked, nothing like the rusted haulers we used out in the Hollow Belt. 4 armed handlers came aboard the Marion without asking permission, and a 5th man in a clean gray uniform introduced himself as Harold Briggs, from what he called Special Assets. "Mr. Cole," he said, shaking my hand with a grip that was just a little too firm. "You've had quite an interesting week." "I found an old ship," I said carefully. "That's all I know." Briggs smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "That ship, Mr. Cole, has been sitting in restricted registry files for longer than either of us has been alive. Nobody has been able to get within 50 meters of its hull without triggering a defense response that ends badly. And yet here you are, walking around inside it, apparently invited." "I didn't ask for any of this," I said. "I believe you," Briggs said, though his tone suggested otherwise, "which is exactly why we need to bring you in for proper evaluation. Medical scans, genetic screening, full debrief. Standard procedure whenever a civilian makes unauthorized contact with a priority object." I felt the ship's presence in the back of my mind before it spoke, a kind of pressure, like static building before a storm. "Tell him no," it said quietly. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice came out. "Not until I understand what's actually happening here." Briggs's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes went cold. "That wasn't a request, Mr. Cole." He nodded to the armed handlers behind him, and 2 of them stepped forward to take my arms. What happened next? I still don't fully understand, even now. The lights on the Marion flickered once, hard, and every screen on the bridge lit up with the same golden symbols I had seen carved into the ancient hull. The armed handlers froze, hands hovering near their weapons, as a voice spoke through every speaker on my ship at once, filling the small cabin with a presence far too large for the space. "This one belongs to no registry," it said, and the words seemed to shake the walls slightly. "He is under my protection. Remove your hands from him, or I will remove your ship from this system." Briggs went pale. To his credit, he didn't panic. He raised a hand slowly, and his handlers backed off immediately. "That's not possible," he said, mostly to himself. "That ship has been dormant for centuries. There's no way it can project a signal like this, not through a civilian vessel's systems, not without a steward to carry the connection." The voice finished for him. "He is not simply a witness to what has woken here, Mr. Briggs. He is the reason it woke at all. I would think carefully about what you do next." Briggs stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time, some new calculation running behind his eyes. "You have no idea what you've stumbled into, do you, Cole?" "No," I admitted. "Not even a little." "Neither do I," he said quietly, "but I intend to find out. And so will a lot of people who are considerably less patient than me." He left the Marion without another word, taking his handlers with him, but before his shuttle pulled away, he turned back to look at me through the narrow viewport, and the expression on his face wasn't anger. It was something closer to worry. Over the following days, everything about my life accelerated in ways I couldn't control. The company pulled my contract, citing safety concerns, then quietly reinstated it after someone higher up apparently decided they needed to keep an eye on me, rather than lose access to me completely. My pay was suddenly tripled. Nobody explained why. Supply drones started arriving at the Marion with equipment I hadn't requested, better sensors, reinforced plating, systems clearly meant to keep me alive a lot longer than my old gear ever could. Meanwhile, the ship, who I had started calling Aster in my own head, because it felt strange to think of something that talked to me as just an object, continued to change. Its lights grew brighter every day. Sections of the hull that had been dark and cracked began to smooth over, healing like a wound closing. It spoke to me constantly now, teaching me fragments of a language and a history I had never learned in school, filling in pieces of a story so large I could barely hold it in my mind. "You were seated," Aster told me one evening, as I floated near her hull in a small shuttle, watching the light patterns shift across her surface. "Your entire species, placed here, hidden, protected, long before your written history began. My makers feared something coming for them, something they could not defeat, and so they scattered their bloodlines far from where anyone would think to look. You are one of the last living threads of that old effort. Perhaps the very last." "That's insane," I said, though the word came out weaker each time I used it, because deep down, some part of me was starting to believe her. Humans evolved on our own. We have fossils. We have history going back millions of years. "You have history going back exactly as far as my makers intended you to have," she answered gently. "They were very good at their work. Good enough that even now, most of your people will never know the truth. But I know it. I was built to know it. And I have been waiting a very long time to tell someone who could finally understand." I sat in that little shuttle for a long time after she said that, staring at the vast golden hull in front of me, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I didn't feel afraid. I felt like the ground under my entire life had just been pulled away, and I was falling into something enormous, something that made every small worry I used to have feel impossibly distant. Word had already started to spread by then, whispers moving through encrypted channels I wasn't supposed to have access to, rumors bouncing between stations, faster than any official report could travel. A dead royal vessel from an empire nobody remembered had woken up in the Hollow Belt. It had chosen someone. It was already growing stronger. And somewhere out among the stars, far beyond anything I could see or imagine, that news was reaching ears that had been waiting an extremely long time for exactly this moment. 3 days after Briggs left, a second ship arrived in the system, and this one didn't belong to any company I had ever heard of. It didn't look human at all. The vessel that dropped out of transit space that morning didn't look like anything built by human hands. It was long and narrow, curved like a blade, with a hull the color of deep ocean water that seemed to shift and ripple, even though nothing about it was actually moving. It made no announcement. It sent no warning signal. It simply appeared, drifting silently toward Aster, like it already knew exactly where it was going. I watched it approach from the Marian's small viewport, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Aster's voice came to me almost immediately, calm but alert, the way a person sounds when they recognize a name they haven't heard in a very long time. "They have finally come," she said. "I did not expect them so soon. Word must have traveled faster than I hoped." "Who are they?" I asked, already pulling on my suit, hands fumbling with the seals. "Do not be afraid," she answered, though the words didn't do much to slow my racing heart. "They are not my makers, but they are old, and they remember things your people have long forgotten. How they react to you will depend entirely on what they believe you are." The alien ship settled into a slow orbit beside Aster's massive hull, close enough that I could see fine details along its surface, patterns of light moving beneath what looked like living skin rather than metal. A small craft detached from its underside and drifted toward the Marian, moving with a grace that made my clunky salvage shuttle look like a toy by comparison. It docked without asking permission, the same way Briggs had, except this time, Aster allowed it. I stood in the narrow airlock of my ship, suit sealed, hands shaking, waiting for the door to open. When it did, I found myself looking at something I had never expected to see in my entire life. She was tall, taller than me by at least a full head, with skin the color of pale silver, that seemed to catch and hold the light rather than simply reflect it. Her eyes were large, dark, and calm, set in a face that was clearly not human but was, in its own way, unmistakably beautiful, sharp cheekbones, and a quiet stillness to her expression that made her look like she had been carved, rather than born. She wore robes of deep blue that moved like water even though there was no breeze inside the airlock, and around her neck hung a small pendant shaped like a spiral, glowing faintly with the same gold light I had seen all over Aster's hull. She studied me for a long moment without speaking, her expression carefully neutral, the way someone looks at a puzzle they're not yet sure how to solve. "My name is Ethera," she finally said, her voice smooth and layered, almost musical, though the words came out in perfect, understandable speech. "I am a historian of the vessel in order. I have traveled a very long way to confirm what the signal networks are claiming. I expect to find nothing here but confusion and coincidence." "That makes two of us," I said, my voice unsteady. "I'm Daniel Cole. I didn't ask for any of this." Ethera's eyes narrowed slightly, studying my face with an intensity that made me want to look away. "The cradle ships have been silent for 10,000 years, Mr. Cole. Not damaged, not destroyed, simply silent, waiting for something that my own people gave up searching for centuries ago. If this vessel behind you has truly woken, and has truly chosen a human, then either something remarkable has happened, or someone is running an elaborate and very cruel deception." "I wish it was a deception," I said honestly. "That would be a lot easier to deal with." She almost smiled at that, just barely, then gestured toward a small device at her hip. "I will need to take samples, genetic material, a full scan. If you are what the signals suggest, there will be markers in your blood that should not exist in any human population on record. If you refuse, I will simply assume the worst and report this as fraud." I looked past her, toward the golden light of Aster's hull glowing steady through the viewport, and felt her presence settle gently in the back of my mind. "Let her look," Aster said. "The truth will not frighten you." It should not frighten her either, though I suspect it will. "Go ahead," I told Ethera. "Do whatever you need to do." She worked quickly and efficiently, drawing a small sample of blood with a device that didn't hurt at all, running it through a scanner she pulled from a case at her side. For a long moment, the only sound in the small airlock was the soft hum of her equipment and the sound of my own breathing. Then the scanner chimed, a soft, clear tone, and Ethera went completely still. She looked at the display for a long time without saying anything. Then she looked up at me, and for the first time since she had arrived, something had changed behind those calm, dark eyes. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It was something closer to shock. "This is not possible," she said quietly, almost to herself. "What is it?" I asked. "What did you find?" She turned the small display toward me, though I couldn't read most of what was written across it, strange symbols and shifting patterns that meant nothing to my untrained eyes. "There is a marker here," she said, her voice tight and careful. a genetic sequence my people have only ever seen in the oldest records of the Cradle dynasty itself. It is called the Steward's Mark. It was believed lost, completely and permanently lost, along with every bloodline that once carried it, when the Cradle fell silent 10,000 years ago. I don't understand what that means, I admitted. It means, Ithera said slowly, choosing each word with obvious care, that whoever built that ship behind you did not simply seed your species and forget about it. They left a guardian line, a family entrusted to watch over their legacy, to inherit it if the Cradle itself ever fell. And that line was supposed to have ended. Every historian in my order believes it ended, and yet here you are. She stared at me like I was something impossible standing in front of her, and I felt a chill run through my entire body that had nothing to do with the temperature of the airlock. That's insane, I said, echoing the same word I had used with Aster days before, though it sounded even weaker now. I'm nobody. I grew up on a mining station. My parents were dock workers. There's nothing special about my family. Your family did not need to know what they were carrying, Ithera said quietly. That was likely the point. A secret buried so deep that even the ones holding it forgot its weight. She was silent for a moment, staring at the scanner display like it might change if she looked at it long enough. Then she looked back up at me, and something in her expression softened, just slightly. The careful suspicion replaced with something closer to disbelief, mixed with a strange, cautious respect. I came here expecting to expose a fraud, she said. I did not expect to find the one thing my entire order has spent centuries searching for, and quietly giving up on. Aster's voice returned then, speaking to both of us at once, filling the small airlock with a presence that made the metal walls seem to hum faintly. You are Ithera Vosh, of the historian line, she said. I remember your order, though it has changed much since I last walked among the living. Tell me, does your council still hold the old promises, or have those been forgotten along with everything else? Ithera's composure cracked for just a moment, her eyes widening. You know my lineage? I know every lineage that once stood witness to the Cradle's fall, Aster answered. Your ancestors made a promise to protect this bloodline, should it ever surface again. I would very much like to know whether that promise still means anything to the people who inherited it. Ithera was quiet for a long time, her gaze moving between me and the golden glow of Aster's hull visible through the viewport, and when she finally spoke again, her voice had lost all of its earlier suspicion. I do not know what my council will decide, she said honestly, but I know what I believe, standing here, looking at what I am looking at. I believe the promise still matters, and I believe you, Daniel Cole, are in far greater danger than you currently understand. What kind of danger? I asked, though some part of me already suspected I wasn't going to like the answer. Ithera's expression turned grave, the last traces of her earlier calm slipping away entirely. The Cradle dynasty did not simply fall on its own, Mr. Cole. It was brought down, deliberately, by forces that profited enormously from its collapse. Those same forces have spent 10,000 years making certain no one ever found what you are standing next to right now. If word of your existence spreads much further than it already has, and I suspect it already has spread further than either of us would like, they will not send historians to verify your bloodline. Then what will they send? I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. She looked at me steadily, her silver skin catching the dim light of the airlock, her expression carrying the weight of a warning she clearly wished she didn't have to give. Whatever it takes, she said quietly, to make certain the last steward of the Cradle dynasty never gets the chance to remember who he truly is. Behind her, through the small viewport, I watched Aster's golden light pulse once, slow and steady, like a heartbeat settling into a rhythm it hadn't used in 10,000 years, preparing itself for something I was only just beginning to understand was coming. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in the Marion's small cabin with Ithera across from me, both of us going over everything Aster could tell us, piecing together fragments of a history so old it had turned into myth, even among the people who were supposed to remember it properly. Ithera explained what she could of the Cradle dynasty, an empire that had once stretched across a portion of the galaxy so vast it defied easy description, a civilization built on principles of stewardship and shared protection between many different species, until something from outside that alliance had grown jealous of its power and set out to destroy it from within. They called themselves the Severance, Ithera said, her voice quiet in the dim cabin light. A coalition of factions who believed no single dynasty should hold that much influence over so many worlds. They spent generations working from the shadows, turning allies against each other, poisoning trust between the member species, until the Cradle's own council collapsed under the weight of its own suspicion. By the time anyone realized what had truly happened, it was far too late to stop it. And they're still out there, I said. The Severance. Their name has changed many times over 10,000 years, Euthera said, but yes, the pattern remains. Wherever old power resurfaces, they find a way to bury it again, before it can threaten the balance they have built for themselves in its absence. Aster's voice joined us then, calm, but heavy with old grief. They took everything from us, she said. My captains, my council, the dynasty I was built to serve and protect. I was one of the last ships to escape, and I hid myself here, waiting, hoping that someday, someone worthy would find their way back to me. I did not expect it would take this long. I did not expect the galaxy to have changed so much in the waiting. I sat with that for a long moment, staring at my own hands like they belonged to someone else entirely, a guardian bloodline, an ancient empire, a hidden enemy that had spent 10,000 years making sure nobody like me ever surfaced again. It was too much to hold all at once, and yet somehow, sitting there in that small cabin with an alien woman who had traveled across the stars just to look me in the eye, it didn't feel like something I could walk away from anymore. So what happens now? I asked, looking at Euthera. If word is already spreading, if this Severance already knows about me, what do we do? Euthera considered the question carefully before answering, her dark eyes steady on mine. Now, she said, we decide whether you intend to hide or whether you intend to stand. Because I promise you, Daniel Cole, the moment my council confirms what I already know to be true, others far less patient than me will come looking for their own answers. And they will not care whether you asked for any of this. Outside the viewport, Aster's hull glowed steady in gold against the black, patient and waiting, as if she already knew exactly which choice I was going to make, even before I had fully admitted it to myself. 3 weeks passed before the Severance made their first real move, and in that time, my entire understanding of the galaxy changed so completely that I sometimes had trouble remembering what my life had felt like before any of this began. Euthera stayed with me during those weeks, splitting her time between the Marion and long conversations aboard Aster's restored decks, where the two of them, the ancient ship and the historian, filled in pieces of a history that stretched back further than any human record. I learned that the Cradle dynasty had never been a single species ruling over lesser ones, the way I first assumed. It had been a partnership, dozens of different peoples bound together under one council, each contributing knowledge, resources, and protection to the others. Euthera's people, the Vesselin, had served as the dynasty's historians and record keepers, a role passed down through her family for longer than she could accurately count. My own bloodline, the one Aster called the Stewards, had served a different purpose entirely. We were the ones entrusted with the dynasty's seedings, Aster explained one evening, as the three of us sat together in her central chamber, the golden pillar of light humming softly beside us. When the council feared what was coming, they did not simply hide their people. They hid pieces of their future, scattered across worlds the Severance would never think to search, each protected by a bloodline sworn to remain hidden until they were needed again. You are not the heir to a throne, Daniel. You are the last living key to a vault my makers built specifically so that their enemies could never fully win. A vault of what? I asked, the question I had been almost afraid to ask since the very beginning. Knowledge, Aster said simply. Technology. Resources that could rebuild what the Severance destroyed, if the right hands ever found them again. And more than that, a truth the Severance has spent 10,000 years trying to erase completely. That the Cradle dynasty did not fail because it was weak. It failed because it trusted the wrong voices, and paid the price for that trust with everything it had built. Euthera, sitting across from me with her legs folded beneath her robes, watched me carefully as Aster spoke, her dark eyes thoughtful. My order has spent centuries treating the Cradle's fall as a historical tragedy, she said quietly, something to be studied, mourned, and left in the past. I do not think any of us truly believed there was still something worth fighting for, not until now. And now? I asked. Now, she said. I am no longer certain what I believe, only that I intend to find out. It was during the 4th week that everything changed. I was aboard the Marion, running routine diagnostics that Aster no longer strictly needed me to perform, but that gave me something to do with my hands while my mind spun through everything I had learned, when her voice cut through my thoughts with a sharpness I hadn't heard from her before. "Ships," she said, "4 of them, entering the system on a trajectory that does not match any registered trade route. They are not broadcasting identification. I do not like this, Daniel." I was on my feet immediately, pulling up every sensor feed the Marion had, my heart already racing. Ethera appeared in the cabin doorway a moment later, her expression tense, the calm scholar's composure she usually carried replaced with something sharper and more alert. "How long until they arrive?" she asked. Aster's voice answered for me, cold and precise. 12 minutes, if their current speed holds. Their hull configuration does not match anything currently listed in your public registries, but I recognize the shape of them regardless. I fought ships built from that same design a very long time ago. "The Severance," I said, my mouth suddenly dry. "Or an heir to whatever they have become in the centuries since," Aster confirmed. "Either way, Daniel, they are not coming here to negotiate." Ethera moved quickly, pulling a small device from her robes and speaking rapidly into it in her own language, sending some kind of alert back toward her own people, though her expression suggested she didn't expect help to arrive in time. "My escort ship is 3 days out," she said grimly. "We do not have 3 days. Then we will have to manage with what we have," Aster said, and I felt something shift in the air around us, a kind of pressure building, like the whole ship was drawing in a slow, deliberate breath. "I am not the vessel I once was, Daniel. Centuries of dormancy have cost me much of my former strength. But I am not helpless either, and I will not allow harm to come to you while I still have power left to prevent it." "What do you need me to do?" I asked, surprised by how steady my own voice sounded, even as my hands trembled at my sides. "Come aboard me," she said. "Both of you. I can protect this hull far better than I can protect that small ship of yours. And Daniel, I will need your hand at my center again, if it comes to that. There are systems within me that will only answer to steward blood. Systems I have not dared to use in 10,000 years, because I never had a reason to trust anyone enough to try." I looked at Ethera, and she looked back at me, and neither of us said anything for a long moment, because there wasn't really anything left to say. We moved. The 4 unmarked ships entered visual range 8 minutes later, sleek black hulls with no markings at all, moving with a coordinated precision that made my stomach twist with dread. They didn't hail us. They didn't send any warning. They simply began adjusting their formation, spreading out around Aster's massive hull in a pattern that looked, even to my untrained eye, exactly like a hunting maneuver. Ethera stood beside me in Aster's central chamber, her face pale but composed, watching the same feed I was watching on a display that had appeared out of the smooth wall like it had always been there. "They intend to disable her before boarding," Ethera said quietly. "That formation is meant to cut off every angle of retreat. They will find that considerably more difficult than they expect," Aster answered, and the golden pillar of light beside us flared brighter, sending warmth pulsing through the chamber floor beneath our feet. "Daniel, your hand, please. Now would be the appropriate time." I stepped forward without letting myself think too hard about it, because thinking too hard about any of this was a fast way to talk myself out of doing anything at all. I placed my palm flat against the light, the same way I had the very first time, and once again, that strange warmth spread up through my arm and into my chest, settling somewhere deep inside me like it belonged there. The entire ship seemed to wake up around me. Lights that had been dim brightened across every corridor. Systems that had been silent for millennia hummed back to life, one after another, a great slow chain reaction spreading outward from the chamber where I stood. Through the connection, I felt something I can only describe as Aster's full attention turning outward, toward the 4 black ships closing in around us, and I felt her anger, old and patient, and finally given a reason to act. "They dared come here," she said, her voice filling the chamber, and somehow, filling my own mind at the same time. "They dared come here, to threaten the one thing I have protected across 10,000 years of silence. I will show them exactly what a cradle vessel remembers how to do." Outside, the black ships opened fire. I felt the impact through the connection before I heard it, a distant shudder running through Aster's hull like a slap against skin rather than a true wound. Alarms did not sound. No damage reports scrolled across any screen. Instead, I felt Aster absorb the blow and answer it, golden light lancing outward from points along her hull that I hadn't even known existed, precise and controlled, striking two of the attacking ships before they could adjust their formation. One of them spun away, trailing sparks and debris. The other went dark entirely, drifting silently, all power apparently gone in a single strike. The remaining two ships broke formation immediately, peeling away from their attack pattern, clearly reconsidering whatever plan they had walked in expecting to execute. "They are retreating," Ethera said, watching the display with wide eyes. I did not think that was possible, not against a ship this old. "They underestimated how much of myself I have already restored," Aster answered, and I could hear something almost like satisfaction in her voice, mixed with a deep, tired relief. "And they underestimated how much strength returns to me, simply from having a steward's hand upon my heart again." The two remaining ships didn't stay to test their luck further. They broke orbit entirely, accelerating away from the system, at a speed that suggested whoever was piloting them had no intention of reporting failure slowly. Within minutes they were gone, jumping into transit space and vanishing as suddenly as they had arrived. I pulled my hand away from the pillar of light slowly, my legs suddenly unsteady beneath me, and Ethera caught my arm before I could stumble, her grip firm and careful. "That was not a full assault," she said quietly, once the silence had settled back over the chamber. "That was a test. They wanted to know exactly how strong she has become, and exactly how far you are willing to go to protect her. And now they know," I said, my voice hoarse. "Now they know," Ethera agreed, "which means whatever comes next will not be a test at all." Aster's light dimmed slightly, settling into a steady, watchful glow, and when she spoke again, there was a weight in her voice that hadn't been there before, something that sounded almost like fear, carefully controlled. "They will not underestimate us again," she said, "which means, Daniel, that you no longer have the luxury of deciding this slowly. The Severance knows exactly what you are now, and an enemy that has spent 10,000 years erasing every trace of my people will not rest until they have erased you as well." I stood there in that glowing chamber, my hand still tingling from where it had touched the light, staring out at the empty space where 4 enemy ships had been only minutes before, and I understood, with a clarity that settled cold and certain in my chest, that whatever quiet life I used to have was never coming back. The only question left was what I intended to build in its place. The full attack came 9 days later, and by then, I was no longer the same man who had once floated nervously outside a sealed asteroid, waiting to see if the light inside it meant harm. Ethera's escort ship had arrived 2 days after the first attack, bringing with it 3 more historians from her order, and, more importantly, a formal record of everything we had learned, sent quietly back to her council before anything could conveniently disappear along the way. It was a small precaution, but an important one. If something happened to us out here, the truth would not simply vanish with us. Aster spent those 9 days growing stronger by the hour, systems long dormant coming back online one after another, as her connection to me deepened. She showed me things I never imagined a ship could do. Defensive barriers that bent incoming fire around her hull rather than simply absorbing it. Communication arrays, capable of reaching across distances that should have taken years for a signal to cross. Memory archives holding records of a civilization so vast and so accomplished that reading even a fraction of it left me dizzy. I trained too, though training feels like too small a word for what actually happened. Ethera taught me how to move through Aster's systems the way a steward was meant to, not by giving commands out loud, but by focusing my intention through the connection at her heart, letting the ship translate what I wanted into action, faster than my own voice ever could. It didn't come easily. More than once, I overloaded a system by accident, or triggered a response I hadn't intended, and Aster would gently correct me, patient in a way that reminded me, oddly, of a parent teaching a child to walk. "You are learning quickly," she told me on the 7th day, as I successfully redirected power from one of her defense arrays, without frying half the circuitry in the process. Faster than any steward I trained in my earlier years. Perhaps 10,000 years of waiting has made me a more patient teacher than I once was. Or maybe I'm just terrified enough to focus properly. I said, and for the first time since any of this started, Aster's presence in my mind carried something that felt distinctly like amusement. Perhaps both things are true, she said. Fear and focus are not always enemies, Daniel. Sometimes they walk hand in hand toward the same purpose. On the 9th day, the Severance returned, and this time, they did not send 4 ships. They sent 11. Aster's alarm reached me the moment her long-range sensors picked up the formation entering the system, and I felt the change in her presence immediately, sharp and focused, all the patience from our training sessions replaced with something colder and more deliberate. This is not a test, she said, her voice carrying through every corridor at once. This is an execution order. They intend to end this today, one way or another. I was already moving toward the central chamber, Ethera close behind me, both of us moving with the kind of urgency that didn't need words to explain itself. Around us, Aster's systems came alive faster than they ever had before, lights blazing bright gold along every corridor, the low hum of restored power thrumming through the deck plating beneath our boots. 11 ships, Ethera said, her voice tight but controlled, as we reached the chamber, and she took her place at a secondary console that had grown from the wall days earlier, built specifically to let her monitor and support the systems I couldn't manage alone. Even at full strength, that is a significant force to face. We are not facing them alone, Aster answered, and something in her tone made both of us look up, waiting for an explanation. I sent word to those who might still remember old promises. The moment the first attack came, I did not know if anyone would answer. It appears someone has. On the display before us, 3 new signals appeared at the edge of the system, moving fast, cutting a direct path toward Aster's position. Ethera studied the readings for a long moment, then let out a breath I hadn't realized she'd been holding.
Vessel and escort vessels, she said, relief clear in her voice.
My council did not simply record what I sent them. They chose to act on it. It seems your promise still means something after all, Aster said quietly, and I heard, underneath the words, something that sounded almost like gratitude 10,000 years overdue. The battle that followed is not something I can describe with the kind of clean, simple language I would use to tell a story, sitting comfortably somewhere safe. It was chaos, sharp and fast and terrifying, fought across distances my mind still struggles to properly picture. I stood at the heart of it, with my hand pressed against Aster's light, feeling every strike she took and every strike she gave in return, my own heartbeat somehow synchronized with the rhythm of her defenses. The 11 Severance ships opened fire in a coordinated wave the moment they entered range, and Aster met it with barriers of golden light that bent and scattered the incoming attacks, sending fragments of energy spinning harmlessly off into open space. I felt the strain of it through our connection, a weight settling into my chest like I was the one holding up something impossibly heavy, and I understood, in that moment, exactly what it meant to carry a steward's burden. Hold steady, Daniel, Aster said, her voice tight with effort. I need everything you can give me, just a little longer. I gritted my teeth and pushed, focusing every ounce of will I had through that connection, feeling her draw on it like a plant drawing on sunlight, her defenses growing stronger, her return strikes growing sharper. 2 of the Severance ships broke apart under the pressure of her counterattack, debris scattering silently into the black. A third peeled away, badly damaged, retreating out of the fight entirely. Ethera's escort ships arrived moments later, adding their own fire to the battle, drawing attention away from Aster's hull, and giving her precious seconds to recover between strikes. The tide of the fight began, slowly and painfully, to turn. But the Severance had clearly expected resistance, and their remaining ships adjusted tactics with unsettling speed, coordinating a strike aimed not at Aster's defenses directly, but at the small shuttle bay where Ethera's people had docked, an obvious attempt to cut off our reinforcements before they could do any further damage. I saw it coming through Aster's sensors half a second before it happened, and without stopping to think, without stopping to weigh the risk properly, I pushed everything I had left through the connection, redirecting a barrier I barely understood how to use, throwing it up around that shuttle bay just as the incoming strike arrived. The impact staggered me hard enough that I fell to my knees, my vision blurring at the edges, pain lancing through my skull like something had physically struck me. But the barrier held, the shuttle bay stayed intact, Ethera's people stayed alive. Daniel, Aster's voice was suddenly close and urgent, no longer distant and commanding, but frightened in a way I hadn't heard from her before. That was too much. You cannot give more than your body can survive giving. Stop, please. Not yet, I gasped, forcing myself back to my feet, my hand still pressed hard against the light, even though every part of my body was screaming at me to let go. Not until this is over. Euthera appeared at my side, gripping my shoulder, her dark eyes wide with worry. Daniel, she is right. You are pushing yourself past what any steward should attempt alone. Then let's not make it alone, I said, and reached out with my free hand, taking hers. I don't fully understand what happened next, even now, looking back on it. Maybe it was something built into Aster's ancient systems, some old protocol meant to let a steward share the burden with a trusted ally standing beside them. Maybe it was something simpler than that, just two people choosing, in a single desperate moment, to hold on to each other and refuse to let go. Whatever the reason, the instant Euthera's hand closed around mine, I felt the weight in my chest ease slightly, the connection through Aster's light steadying, growing stronger rather than weaker, like a single small flame suddenly given a second source of fuel. Aster's voice, when it came again, was filled with something I can only describe as wonder. A bond, she said softly. A true bond, formed in the middle of battle. My makers spoke of this in old records I thought I would never see proven true again. Together, you carry more than either of you could alone. Whatever it was, it worked. The remaining Severance ships, already battered and clearly not prepared for a fight this costly, broke formation entirely, scattering away from the system as fast as their engines could carry them, abandoning whatever orders they had been given, rather than risk complete destruction. Silence settled over the system slowly, debris drifting where enemy ships had been only minutes before, Euthera's escort vessels regrouping cautiously around Aster's massive hull, and I stood there in the center of that golden chamber, exhausted, shaking, Euthera's hand still tightly gripped in mine, and felt something I hadn't expected to feel at all in that moment. Relief. Simple, overwhelming relief. It is over, Aster said quietly, her voice heavy with the particular kind of exhaustion that comes after holding on to something with everything you have left. For now, at least, they will not forget this defeat easily. But neither, I think, will the rest of the galaxy forget what happened here today. In the weeks that followed, the truth of what had occurred in that quiet, forgotten system spread faster than anyone, myself included, could have predicted. Euthera's council released their formal records, carefully worded but unmistakable in their meaning, confirming the existence of a surviving steward bloodline and the reawakening of a cradle vessel, believed lost for 10,000 years. Other old alliances, ones that had quietly given up hope of ever seeing the cradle's legacy return, began reaching out cautiously, curious and wary in equal measure, testing whether the stories were truly as extraordinary as they sounded. I didn't become some grand ruler overnight, and honestly, I never wanted to. What I became instead was something closer to a bridge, a single point of connection between an old, broken promise and whatever new future might be built from its remains. Aster remained my home, growing stronger every day, her golden light steady and warm across a hull that had once been buried and forgotten, now standing proudly in open space for anyone brave enough to approach. Euthera stayed too. Not because Aster demanded it, and not because some old promise required it of her, but because, somewhere in the middle of everything that had happened, in the quiet moments between danger and recovery, we had built something neither of us had expected to find out, here in the cold, forgotten edge of a dying star system. You know, she said to me one evening, as we stood together on Aster's outer viewing deck, watching the stars shift slowly outside the reinforced glass. When I first arrived here, I expected to expose a simple fraud and return home the same day. And instead? I asked. She smiled, a small, genuine expression that had become much easier for her over the past weeks. Instead, I found the truth my entire order had quietly stopped believing in. And I found, she paused, glancing sideways at me, someone worth standing beside, when the truth turned out to be far more dangerous than any of us expected. Aster's voice joined us then, warm and steady, filling the deck around us without intruding on the moment. The galaxy ignored your people for a very long time, Daniel, she said. Not because you were unimportant, but because that ignorance was exactly what kept you safe, long enough to grow, long enough to endure. That time has ended now. What comes next will not be simple, and it will not always be safe. But I do not believe, standing here, watching what the two of you have already survived together, that either of you intends to face it alone. I looked out at the stars stretching endlessly beyond Astor's hull, thinking back to the man I had been only weeks earlier, a tired salvage worker, with nothing more ambitious on his mind than his next paycheck, and I realized that man was gone now, replaced by someone who still didn't fully understand everything he had inherited, but who had already decided, without regret, to carry it forward anyway. The severance would come again. I had no illusions about that. Old enemies built on 10,000 years of careful, patient cruelty did not simply give up after a single defeat, but for the first time since that light had opened in front of me, out in the cold dark of the Hollow Belt, I didn't feel like prey waiting to be found. I felt like someone standing at the beginning of something enormous, with an ancient ship at my back, a fierce and steady ally at my side, and a legacy finally ready, after 10,000 years of silence, to speak again. Whatever came next, the galaxy that had spent so long forgetting my people was about to learn exactly why that silence had never meant weakness at all. It had simply meant we were waiting for the right moment to remind them who we truly were.